Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Matt Lyle, and today is Tuesday, June 23rd, and this is episode 14 of the Coffee with Coach Lyle show, where I help parents, coaches, and athletes around the world tackle the challenges of life and athletics. If you're just tuning in, let me know you're here. Hit that like button. Let me know where you're tuning in from. It's always good to see you guys this morning. I appreciate you guys tuning in, so let me know where you're at. And as always, we're going to set some goals this morning. We're trying to hit that 300 likes goal this morning, trying to hit 300 likes this morning. So hit that like button and hit that share button. If we get to 50 shares today, I am going to send someone, a random winner, a signed copy of my book, Dear Coach. So hit that like button, hit that share button. I appreciate you guys tuning in this morning. I appreciate it very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Wes. Good morning, Antonio. Good to see everybody. Rogers is tuning in from Minnesota. We got Jason in San Antonio. Robin, as always, from New Brunswick, Canada. Awesome to see you guys. Good morning in Oregon, of course. Mary tuning in from Ontario. Awesome. Jason's tuning in from Georgia, so you got to sleep in a little bit this morning. Nicole says, go Dogs from Fresno. Awesome. Not too far away. James is in San Antonio, Texas. Allison's also in Texas. Daniel's in Texas. Gary and Missy in Louisville, Kentucky. So we've got some Texas people in the house tonight. You know, it's funny. I get to see the stats of our show. And right now, it's pretty neck and neck every morning between California and Texas in the sense of people who watch the show. So it's kind of pretty funny to see. Again, Wade from Texas. Bruce in Las Vegas, nice and warm there. Beaverton, an awesome place. Fort Wayne, I've been to a lot of these places. Nathan in one of my favorite cities in the country, Denver, Colorado. I love that place. Spent a lot of time there working with Columbine High School in Littleton, not too far away. Long Island and San Diego, my favorite city in America almost, if you take away Maui, San Diego. So awesome. Good seeing you guys all this morning. Thanks you guys for tuning in. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're trying to get to 300 likes. I see 58 on the scoreboard this morning. That's awesome. Trying to get to 50 shares. If you like this show, hit that share button. Share it with the people that you watch with. So I appreciate that. Now, remember, if you can't join us at 7 a.m. this morning, if you can't join us, this show always goes up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts after the show. So you can always check it out at Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. And then I put the show on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Coach Lyle. You can go over there and watch all of the shows. You can watch segments of the show. So go over there and subscribe to the YouTube channel for me. As you're getting settled in this morning, let's talk about today's starting lineup. Today's starting lineup, I'm going to lead off with a question like we always do. I always want to have a good question for you guys to chime in a little bit, so get your fingers ready to type some answers. Then I'm going to share one of the worst parent emails I've ever read, ever. And our main topic of the day is going to be about multi-sport athletes, the pros and cons of multi-sport athletes and the pros and cons of specialization and kind of what age. As always, we're going to go to 10 minutes of Q&A, so get your questions ready. What questions do you want to have this morning as we get to Q&A session after that? And then the final segment of the day is always my coach's advice of the day, where I kind of share my experience as a coach and a parent for the last almost 25 years now. So I'll share with you this morning. So as we get started, the question of the day this morning, okay? In the last 12 months, and maybe before COVID hit, how many sports did your kids currently play in that time frame, and which sports were they? So did they only play one sport in that whole time? You know, if you've got a softball daughter, baseball son, basketball, they only play one sport in that 12 months? Did they play 3 or 4 sports? I'm just curious, the people who are tuning in this morning, you know, in the last 12 months before COVID, I guess, you know, what sports did your kids play? How many of them did they play? I want to hear kind of from the parents and just curious to see who's tuning in this morning. Again, thanks for hitting that like button. My like button scoreboard says 112 likes. We're trying to get to 300, and we've already got over 100 this morning, so that's awesome. Thank you, guys. We've got some people tuning in from all over the world today. Alvin from Melbourne, Australia. My wife lived there for a year in college, and it's on our bucket list to go very soon. So, Alvin, I'm going to come visit you when the world settles down a little bit. Brad from Maryland. Awesome. I used to live in Bowie, Maryland. I actually was the official scorer for the Bowie Bay Sox. So It's awesome to see everyone just across the world tuning in. Nashville, one of my favorite places in the world. Hattie B's Fried Chicken, one of my favorite places in the world as well. For me, food is how I remember so many cities I've been to, like Philadelphia and the Philly cheesesteaks, and the Pittsburgh sandwich. If you've never had a Pittsburgh sandwich before, learn about it. Google it. It's one of the greatest things ever, and it involves French fries on your burger or on your sandwich, I guess you could say. So check that out. The question of the morning was, what sports did your kids play and how many? And so Daniel says, my son was doing 2 sports, swimming and diving. That's true. That is 2 sports. Rock says kids did volleyball, softball, track, and golf. That's awesome. Andrew says softball and volleyball for my girl, mountain bike racing for my son. Awesome. That's really cool. Antonio says just 1 was very hard to play 2 with pitching lessons, practice, hard to be everywhere. And we're going to get into that today. That's really an interesting thing because the demands of time around sports. So that's pretty crazy to see. A lot of people are saying 1 sport, softball. Echo's tuning in from South Mississippi. His daughter only played softball. So that's cool. So many other things. Hello from Maine. Awesome. Travis said softball, hockey, basketball, volleyball, track. And I try to think about my own kids. My son, my 8-year-old son, last year he did golf, soccer, basketball, baseball. I'm trying to get him into lacrosse. That's kind of the next one. Lacrosse isn't that big in California. It's hard to find clubs, but I just think it's a really fun sport, and I want to coach it and learn how to coach it. So I'm going to try to get him to do that. My 16-year-old son, he did swimming too. He did swim team too. So swim team, I add that onto there. But my 16-year-old son, track and field, cross country, those are sports he's been doing. Travis says we did 6 sports: baseball, softball, volleyball, soccer, basketball, and hockey. Awesome. Hockey is another one I would love to try. Seth says Permanthi Brothers in Pittsburgh. Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. Pittsburgh sandwich is unbelievable there. It's so good. I can't tell you. If you guys haven't learned, I love food, and I associate a lot of my travel to food. Ron says softball, softball, softball. Ron's daughter, Tina, plays at Fresno State. She's an absolute beast. She hits the ball. I think she holds our record at Fresno State in the cages with like 300 feet bomb in the cages off the hit tracks. It's pretty incredible. Lila says field hockey, softball, and track. Tammy says softball with 2 girls, baseball, basketball, and football for my son. So you guys are still doing a lot of sports this morning. That's awesome. Robin says baseball and hockey. Mary says competitive baseball, but through school, just about everything else. Hockey at the A level up until last year. I see there's a lot of hockey people tuning in this morning. Again, I never played hockey. I played a lot of roller hockey growing up. That was about the closest we had in California. We wore those neon colored spandex shorts in the late 80s and rollerblades and roller hockey in the court with our friends. That was about my extent of hockey, but I always thought it would be really cool to do. So I appreciate everybody tuning in and telling Jerry says football, basketball, and track. Go Bucks. So that's awesome. So you guys are out there. Your kids are doing a lot of stuff, and that's really cool. If you're just tuning in, the question of the day was, in the last 12 months, what sports did your kids play and how many of them? There was answers across the board. So many people doing all kinds of sports. Some were doing only 1 sport, but the majority were doing a lot of sports. So if you're just tuning in again, and we've got a goal for the day. Our goal for the day is 300 likes. I'm looking up the scoreboard. It's at 135 early this morning. That's awesome. Thanks for hitting that like button. Thank you to those who hit the share button. If you hit the share button, I'm going to send a signed copy of my book, Dear Coach, to a random winner. So please hit that share button. Let's get the word out about the show. It's been a fun show to do, and I appreciate everybody who tunes in every morning. So let's get into our Dear Coach segment of the morning. Today's Dear Coach segment, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you guys, is one of the worst emails I've ever seen from a parent. And if I hadn't read the actual email, I almost wouldn't believe it. So I'm going to warn you, this one's kind of a rough one. And it kind of just blew, when I read it and I saw the actual email, it kind of just blew my mind. So if you don't know what the Dear Coach segment of the show is, if you haven't watched it before, last summer I wrote a book called Dear Coach. You can search for it on Amazon. It's real emails from parents behaving badly on the field, at home, and behind their computer screens. And I want to tell you guys, If you don't already know, 100% of the proceeds of this book go to an organization serving urban youth in Chicago and Boston and some other places called thebase.org. So check them out. And thank you to everyone who's bought this book. I can tell you right now, I think it's almost in the top 10 in Kindle on sports books, and it's moved up the charts across the country in different categories too. So everybody who's picked up this book for 10, 11 bucks, I appreciate it very much. It's an awesome book. It's really fun stories and some good coach commentary in there. So check it out on Amazon. I appreciate you guys. And if you did buy it, please go leave a review, a 5-star review. If you're going to leave a 2-star review, don't leave a review. All right, so let's get into the actual Dear Coach segment of the morning, okay? So today's Dear Coach segment, I want to read to you guys. Here we go. Dear Coach, and I want you guys to understand this is an email from one parent to a coach. Dear Coach, I would really appreciate it if you would tell your fat, ugly, disgusting wife to stop posting annoying things on Facebook about parenting and coaching. I am hoping she can use that energy to get some of her missing teeth replaced, or maybe exercise a little to lose a few chins, or maybe even her belly. I don't wish bad on you, because you're waking up next to her is enough punishment for any man. Sincerely, a tactless parent. And it is a great illustration done by Wes Molbash here. Wes says, my name is Mike, and I'm new to the group, and I really knocked it out of the park today. This is a recovery group, not a celebration group. And so I can tell you that is an absolutely awful, terrible email. But I'll tell you guys, it resonates with me a lot as well on social media. I've gotten a lot of criticism on Facebook and social media from people saying, stick to coaching, stay away from parenting. I'm like, I've had 5 kids. I've been a parent for 23 years. I've been coaching for 20 years. I'm pretty sure they go pretty close hand in hand. So, whenever I hear people say, stick to this or stick to that, if you have some experience in that life, in those areas, I think it's pretty okay to say that. So, and again, that was a real email, word for word. And like I said, I read it, and it was from a travel ball parent to a coach. I was just an absolute shock. It's disgusting, sad email. But I put it in there because, it's real. These are real things that I know coaches deal with. Hopefully that's never happened to you and that type of an email, but those are real things. I've seen, obviously, it happen. So, that guy, really sad, and you can tell there's so much other things going on in his head besides his daughter and son and coaching. So that's a Dear Coach segment today. Usually the segments are very funny stories, but today it's probably one of the saddest stories in the book, and I just, like I said, I wanted to share it because it's real. I think a lot of people, they get upset and they don't know they start firing off on the keyboard. So stay away from the emails if you're upset. Okay, so if you're just tuning in, we just got done with our Dear Coach segment this morning. And I appreciate everyone who's listening in. We had a great question of the day. The question of the day was, first, where are you from if you're tuning in? Let me know where you're tuning in from. We've had Australia, Canada, across the United States. People are tuning in from all over the world this morning. I appreciate you very much. Hit that like button. We're at 156 likes on my scoreboard. We're trying to get to 300 likes this morning. So hit that like button if you're just tuning in. Let me know you're here. We just got done with our Dear Coach segment with a really sad and crazy story. And it was cool to see everyone shared their stories about what their kids are up to. Sarah said 3 sports, year-round soccer, cross-country, track and field, club baseball. This sounds a lot like my family growing up. If you don't know, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. 6 of us played college sports, and we were playing every sport across the gamut growing up. The only reason my other sibling didn't play college sports is that he has Down syndrome. He just turned 30 years old this year. Awesome kid, probably more athletic than some of my siblings. If you're listening, you know who I'm talking about. So my brother Daniel has Down syndrome, an awesome guy, and actually an incredible athlete for being Down syndrome, and just a great brother. So, and he knows he's my favorite brother. So it's great to see some of you guys have big families playing lots of sports. I know in our house, to this day, I ask my mom, how did you get us all to practice? How did this even happen? I don't even understand how we could have got people everywhere. So anyways, today, for today's main topic, I want to talk about multi-sport athletes and specialization in athletes. And first, I want to start with with my own experience. I think talking from my own experience is always really important. When I was growing up, we played everything. Kids played everything. Like I talked about before, roller hockey in the streets, two-hand touch football, basketball. I played CYO basketball for St. Agnes. Across the board, we played everything. The only sport I didn't play, and I regret it, is soccer. And soccer and golf are two sports I never played, and I really wish that I had. But when I got to high school, I never thought about specialization. I just knew I loved sports. I wanted to play. And so for me, I played baseball. I lettered in baseball. I lettered in football. I lettered in basketball. And I lettered in track. And for me, the season was really simple. In the summer, you got ready for football season. You did summer workouts. You did 7-on-7 football, and then we got into double days, and school started. And you're on the football team. Life was all about football. As soon as football season ended, the next day I was at basketball practice, and we played basketball all the way until February. And then baseball season started, and I did baseball. And I was fortunate enough to have a baseball coach and a track coach that worked together. That once a week I ran on the track team. I never actually went to a track practice ever in my life, but I did get to run track at the track meet. So I was very fortunate to do that, and had a track coach that was willing to do that for me so that I could play baseball basically full time. So I got to do 4 sports, and honestly, there was some basketball that we did in the summer. Played some summer basketball, did a little bit of summer baseball, but we just played year round. We played whatever sport was going, and that was my experience. So I'm all about multi-sport athletes, and let's talk about that a little bit more. So let's start right there. Let's talk about the kind of the pros and cons of being a multi-sport athlete. Okay, and the first thing that really comes into play is what's the pros and cons. So some of the things like developing different skills. Typically athletes who participate in multiple sports have the ability to develop skills that complement other sports. For example, if a football player runs track or plays basketball, he can further his speed, his footwork, his hand-eye coordination. Same thing across other sports. So if you're playing multiple sports, there are great benefits to the one sport maybe you like the most or that you're better at. When I went into high school, I thought I was a better baseball player, and I wanted to play Major League Baseball. I wanted to play college baseball. But as I got into it, and in my sophomore, junior year, I realized that football was my best sport, and that was my best chance of playing in college. But they help each other out. They definitely help each other out. One of the advantages of multi-sport athletes is minimal burnout. Okay, there's no secret that a lot of our kids nowadays are quitting because of burnout. And some kids are getting burned out like 10, 11, 12 years old. It's insane to me that you're getting burnout then. High school, I can see it. My senior year of high school, I told my basketball coach, man, my body is beat up. I'm not going to play college basketball, and I don't want to play this year because I'm just burned out. And I was almost 18 years old. So, it's no secret that kids are getting burned out left and right. And most kids are getting pushed to play year-round of one sport, and that's a really quick way to get burnout. Some kids don't get burned out, and that's great, but one of the advantages of multi-sport athletes is the no burnout factor for the most part. And then, for a lot of kids, like I said, a major difficulty for really good athletes is deciding which sport they want to play in college. Unlike Bo Jackson, most athletes don't play multiple sports in college. So it can be hard for someone like me who, I was really good at football. And so for me, the draw of college football started becoming really big. But I really liked college baseball too. And I didn't want to choose right then. I wanted to wait until I was in college to choose. So it allows you to kind of push off the choosing a little bit if you're really good at a couple sports. And then the risk of injury in other sports. Injuries are common in sports. We know that. And it's not often that a player will play their whole career without some injury. Everyone's going to get injured to some degree. But a problem for multi-sports injuries is getting injured in the sport they play in the offseason. I know for high school coaches, for travel ball coaches, especially if your kid is like a D1 prospect and they're really good, you start to get worried. LeBron James wanted to play football in high school, but the risk of injury there is real. To get injured in another sport, that's kind of a bummer. And for me, I could talk. I had a lot of some basketball injuries that suffered for me in baseball a little bit. So, that's one of the problems that I see a lot. So. Now let's flip the conversation. Now let's talk about athletes who specialize and the pros and cons of that. So Here's the pros and cons of specializing in one sport. So if you want to specialize, let's talk about specializing for a minute. One of the pros of it is you're perfecting your skills for that sport. You're focusing all your energy on one sport, and the set of skills is great to master that sport. For example, like I said, baseball or softball. For if you're a pitcher or a hitter, specializing in that, you can definitely improve your skills much more than if you play multiple sports. Okay, so you can get better at the sport by doing that. You can build confidence this way. If an athlete specializes in a sport, they can become great in a sport versus being good at a lot of sports. I think for me, I wasn't incredible at every sport, but I was good enough in every sport to play at a high level. Whereas if I just had focused on one sport, maybe I could have done better in that sport. So, focusing on one sport can build a little confidence. You can go from being good at a bunch of sports to being great in one sport. And it's really about your goals. Is that something you want? One of the cons is more frequent burnout. We talked about this before. If any athletes who spend year-round playing one sport or focusing on one sport, they get burned out a lot more. Just like a lot of you parents who work your job every day. You work the same job every day and you don't have something new. It gets you to feeling like, oh man, I feel like I'm getting burnt out a little bit. So, that's one of the things that happens is burnout. And then overuse injuries. We're seeing this a lot in baseball, especially with elbows and arms. You're seeing a lot of overuse injuries. This is huge in specialization. So if you're going to specialize, you need to be really careful about injuries. Be really smart about it because injuries, Tommy Johns are happening. Tommy John surgeries are happening all over the country still at unbelievable numbers. 15, 16-year-old kids getting Tommy John surgery. So overuse injuries is a big issue with specialization. So be careful about that. And I want to talk about, a few years ago at a national baseball conventions, there was this panel. And three of the biggest names in college baseball were on this panel. You had LSU's Paul Mainieri. You had Vanderbilt's Tim Corbin, one of my mentors, one of the greatest coaches of all time, in my opinion. And you had UCLA's John Savage. And they were all asked, can you comment on your feelings about multiple sport athletes versus single sport specializations? Okay? So they were asked these. These are three big-time coaches. And I want to read you guys some of the answers that they gave. So Paul Mainieri from LSU spoke first. He said, if I had a choice between recruiting two players and one player played baseball year-round and the other player football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring, I'd take the multi-sport athlete every time, all factors considered equal. Remember that part of the quote. All factors considered equal, meaning equal skills. Mainieri then opened the floor. He kind of said, hey, and there were some pro scouts there. There were some MLB people there. And they all, at this convention, they all nodded their head. Yep, we agree. We agree with that. Then Coach Corbin from Vanderbilt said, the mind does get stale. So if you play baseball for 12 months, you can go into a mode of, yes, you are there, yes, you are training, but really is there practice with depth? Is your mind really into it? And that's a great thing. Like a lot of people go through the motions that are specialization. They just play every day, they practice every day, they go through the motions, they trust the process, but they don't love the process. And I talk a lot about that. And then the UCLA coach, John Savage, said, we wish some guys had played football growing up or basketball. Basketball's not as physical as football, but just in the wear and tear. Guys that are 35 years old are taking 3 months off. These 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds are playing year-round, especially in Southern California. I think we all agree we love the multi-sport guy just because of those reasons. Now, those are three big-name college baseball coaches, SEC, two SEC coaches, a Pac-12 coach, saying they love multi-sport athletes. They wish everyone had done that. Now, there's a big but there, and I want to say that what the one of the things about that is that a lot of you have experience with this. Let's say you get to high school, you're a multi-sport athlete, you want to play multiple sports, and your coaches kind of don't let you, or they talk you down for it, they convince you not to. You have to understand that those three coaches I talked about, UCLA, Vanderbilt, the athletes that they're recruiting are D1 high, some of the best baseball players in the country. So my guess is they would recruit those players whether they played soccer, basketball, golf, rowing. It doesn't matter. They're still going to recruit those level of athletes. So The point is that context is really important. So a blanket statement about whether a multi-sport athlete or specializing in one sport, it just doesn't work. So always remember context when you hear coaches say that, because I know some of you have experience with high school coaches. You want to play two sports, and they've got summer training, and they tell you, you know what, if you play summer basketball, it's going to be really hard for you to make the baseball team in the spring. I can tell you, I know a lot of coaches that do that. They manipulate their athletes, they manipulate the parents to not let them play multiple sports. So, for me, that's something you got to be really, really careful of and have the conversations. For me, as a high school coach, I coached high school baseball for a long time. I always planned ahead for those kids. I scheduled my schedules for kids like that, and we always had we had a lot of basketball players, so I would always schedule our games later in the season, stack them in the later of the season than the beginning of the season, so that I could have all my players. So context is really important when you hear big name college coaches say, I love multi-sport athletes. So just remember that. And just remember that every athlete's circumstance is different. If you enjoy playing multiple sports, play multiple sports. And make sure that you're, if you're trying to get recruited, you plan for that. Okay. So for me, if it's just about playing and having fun, do what you want to do. But if you're like, hey, you know what? I really want to play in college, but I really like playing multiple sports. What can I do? I hate to tell you, but those kids are going to have to work a little bit harder. They're going to have to work a little bit harder in that certain sport. So, for example, let's say you like basketball and football, and you're okay at those sports. You love playing them, and you're a high school athlete. But, softball or baseball in spring, that's your really good sport. You're going to have to put that extra time into that sport, and it's going to take work, and it's going to be hard. So just remember that to take that into account. If you put the same level of effort in all three of those sports, unless you're an incredible top-level athlete, it's going to be difficult for that. Now, however, here's one of the things about specialization. I am totally fine with it, parents. If my kid says, you know what, I only like baseball. I don't really like these other sports. I just love this sport, basketball or soccer, or whatever the sport is, and I only want to play that. Golf is a good example. Volleyball. I'm totally fine with that. You just got to have these boundaries. You got to have appropriate time off. You got to follow good training protocols and to avoid injuries, to avoid burnout. You got to have those systems in place. Okay, if you don't talk about when are the breaks going to be, they need to have 3 months off out of the year. So what are those 3 months going to look like? Is it August? Is it December? When are we taking these months off? When are we getting these breaks? Because if you don't, I'm telling you right now, you're going to push your kids to burnout. You're going to push them to overuse injuries. So I am totally fine with specialization. If it's kid driven, if it's parent driven, that's a different thing. So make sure you maximize your off-season time to train smart and focus on academics. Immerse yourself in all aspects of the game. I think college coaches appreciate you taking time off sometimes. You don't have to play year-round. You don't have to be at every showcase. You don't have to be at every travel ball tournament. It's okay to take a break, to get better, to be healthy, because the healthier your athlete is, emotionally, mentally, physically, the better they're going to perform, the better they're going to do. So whether you decide to play multiple sports or just one, the only guarantee is that nothing's guaranteed. For all players, getting to the next level takes practice, hard work. It takes planning. You've got to be able to have a plan of what you're going to do. And whatever you decide to do, you should spend time doing what you love. And you do it to the best of your ability. If you're going to do something, that's one of the rules that we have in our house. If you're going to do something, you got to do it at 100%. You can't show up to practice and give 50% effort just because you want to play multiple sports. You got to give 100%. And so one of the things I want to just kind of finish up with a few points. There's been some studies done about specialization. I think this can help some parents if you're on the fence about deciding, how do I support my kid in this? So, children who play one sport exclusively, they really haven't increased in number over the years. But what's happened is they're becoming younger and younger. So the number of kids, when we were in my age group, in my generation, specialization didn't really happen till 14, 15, 16 years old. Now it's starting to happen 8, 9, 10 years old, which blows my mind that that's happening. It honestly makes me sad that that's the case. I love people that are doing multiple sports as long as they possibly can. There's a study from the American Academy of Physicians that emphasized that even if a child is focused on professional play or getting a college scholarship, participation in multiple sports still improves the health of the child and their overall performance. They recommend that children should have at least 3 months off from intensive sports and at least 1 day of rest per week. Okay, so that's at least 1 day off per week and 3 months out of the year. And I hold to that, whether it's a physician saying that or a coach saying that. For me, as a baseball, softball coach for a lot of my career, I would tell our kids, you take August off, and like November, December. Those are some months you can take, or June if you're not at the older levels. But like August is a good month to take off. December is a good month to take off, and so for me those 2 months are really important. And find some other time in there to also, because I'm telling you right now, specialization too young is where we see a lot of injuries, a lot of overuse injuries. We see a lot of burnout, emotional burnout, physical burnout. And different sports require different mental mindsets and physical skills. So the more sports you can play, the more diverse your skill set. For me, as an adult, golf is the most challenging sport to me. I love it. But if I had played it growing up, it would have taught me a lot more about my mindset. It would have made me a lot more mentally tough. So to me, the more sports you play, the more just the mental skill set you have too. There was a study released in 2017 that said, and it looked at 237 professional athletes in the NBA. So it took 237 NBA players and compared those who were specializing in a single sport by high school versus those who spent high school playing a variety of sports. Out of those 237, 36 of them were multi-sport athletes in high school, and 201 were single sport athletes. The 37 who did not specialize in high school played an average of 78% of games versus 72% of games for the single sport athletes. So they actually played more. The multi-sports athletes were also less likely to sustain injury. 25% had one injury as opposed to 43% in a single sport. Interesting enough, 94% of multi-sport athletes were still active in the league as opposed to 81% of the single sport ones. So again, like the studies have shown, the multi-sport athletes can last a lot longer into their career. But here's the thing, for some individual sports, gymnastics, someone mentioned swimming and diving, water polo, that's a little bit different. This could occur when they're earlier, they're younger, where training's a little bit different versus like a team sport or endurance sport. So, those are a little bit different when it comes to specialization. Your kid might be really into that, and again, there's always exceptions to the rules. So lastly, what does this mean for parents and coaches, everybody involved in your child's athletic journey? And if you're a high school kid listening in this morning, here's a few recommendations I want to leave you with. Number one, make sure your athletes have multiple avenues for development. For some athletes, this might involve running track in the off season if you play football. I know this is a really cool one. So you play football in the fall, maybe you weightlift and rest in the winter, and then you run track in the spring. Those two are really complementary to each other. Same with soccer and basketball and some other sports that you can match those up really well by playing one in the fall, one in the spring, or vice versa. So find the sports that complement each other if you really are interested in doing that. And then parents, you need to recognize what goals your child actually has. Okay, my 8-year-old son, he just wants to play. He loves to play. So I'm just going to let him play whatever sports he wants to play. And when he shows that he's really interested in one sport, I'm going to, turn up the encouragement in that sport a little bit. But you need to talk to your kids, especially as they get 13, 14, 15 years old. What do you want to do? Do you just want to play these multiple sports? That's awesome. I'll support you in that. Or do you really want to play college volleyball? Hey, you want to play college volleyball? Well, it's going to be a tough road. This is what it takes. Do you still want to do multiple sports? Do you want to go all in on the specialization? So parents, don't make it about you. Make it about them. Talk to them about what their goals actually are. And then make those goals and the expectation of those goals and what it takes to be very clear. It says, for example, if someone on your child wants to be the next LeBron James, understand what it takes to do that and the hours and effort that puts into that. And then parents, encourage your athletes to take time off. We talked about this. I'm going to keep hammering it. Give them rest. Give them other interests. music, whatever other interests they have in their life, art. Encourage those areas too. Academics, obviously, but find ways to encourage them in non-athletic interests. Don't let your kids' identity and their interests be wrapped up into one sport or just sports for that matter. Get them involved in other things. Encourage them to take that rest. Figure out what that 2 to 3 months off of the year looks like, or maybe more. And then create a support system. You've got parents, coaches, athletic. If you're in high school, athletic trainers. Get them all on the same page. Talk to them about, hey, this is what my son's goals are. These are what my daughter's goals are. And so, how can we help support that? My daughter wants to play multiple sports, coach. How can you help me do that? How can you help me encourage them with that? And then lastly, remember that organized sports is supposed to be fun, and always put the athlete's well-being first and foremost. So make sure those are the decisions that you make ahead of them. Excuse me, a little cough this morning. And I understand the allure of it all, okay? But I can tell you a lot of NFL, NBA players, a lot of them, they don't specialize early. They didn't specialize at all. So think about your goals, think about rest, and ultimately sit down and talk to your kid and make the best decision for them. Don't compare what other people are doing. I don't care what other people are doing. Care about what's best for your child mentally, physically, emotionally, and give them the best chance to achieve their goals. Okay, make that the point of whether or not they do multiple sports, specialization or not. Let it be about them. Let them understand that you support them in that, and you want to support them in that. So that's what I have to say about specialization and multi-sport athletes. Next, we're going to go into our Q&A time. So get your questions going on. Get your questions thought of, what you want to ask this morning. Excuse me, a little tickle in my throat this morning. So I'm checking up on my scoreboard right now. It says 228 likes. 228 likes. We're trying to get to 300 likes this morning. We're trying to get to 300 likes. So hit that Q&A button. Hit that like button and get your questions ready for this morning. I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock for Q&A. Q&A can be about anything. It could be about specialization of multi-sport athletes. It could be about life, parenting, coaching, you name it. Family-friendly questions, I'm going to answer them. So we've got 10 minutes I'm going to put on the scoreboard right now. All right, so here's the questions this morning. And if you're just tuning in, you missed a lot of our segments. These segments will be up on youtube.com/Coach Lyle, and they will also be on podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. You can always catch this show later or just hit the rewind button when this thing is over. If you're just tuning in, hit that like button and let me know where you're tuning in from. We've had Australia, Canada, all over the United States today. It's cool to see everybody this morning. So if you're just tuning in, let me know where you're tuning in from. And let's get to our Q&A time. James asks, what sport do you think supplements baseball the best? That's a good question. I think it really depends on the kid. Like I said, track and field is really great. Football, if that's something that's I think is a healthy choice for your kids. But basketball, to me, anything hand-eye coordination wise, I think is really good. I think almost any sport can go well with that. Ryan asks, one, can you explain the JUCO route versus smaller school D2, D3, NAIA? Too many players and parents think JUCO is a huge downgrade, but I support this route to some of our guys. I was a JUCO guy who was then offered multiple D1 scholarships. So the JUCO route, I'm a huge fan of the JUCO route. I did it after a couple stops in my career, and so the JUCO route, especially from a cost standpoint, if you're a family that can't really afford it, the problem with D3 and NAIA schools is most of them are really expensive. So they might be able to offer some scholarships, but it can be really expensive. So the JUCO route is a great route. Anybody who talks down on that just doesn't understand it. I highly recommend, if you're on the fence about it or it's a money issue, you don't have some really good offers, go to the JUCO route, find a good junior college, community college to go to at minimal cost. You can still work on your development there. You can still go D1 or whatever goals you have. Huge fan of the JUCO route. Highly encourage it. Anybody who's talking down about that, to me, just doesn't understand what it is. Joshua says, my son is going into his freshman year in the fall. It's a pretty exciting time. He is going to the same high school where I went. The varsity baseball coach was my head coach when I played there 20 years ago. That's pretty cool. The head coach recently asked me to be head coach of the freshman team. I'm really hesitant because I've coached my son since he was 5. I want him to have his own experience, but I also know all of these kids and they want me to coach the team. I'm conflicted. Advice. That's a great thing. I would talk to the coach about it. Say, hey, here's my reasons for doing it, not wanting to do it. I would say, your kid's a freshman. You're only going to do it for his freshman year. And I would tell the kids at the first team meeting, get them all together, explain to them the situation. Hey, this is my son. I know a lot of you. And make the expectations very clear. Because if those aren't clear and the parents aren't on the same page, you're going to deal with a lot of parent issues, a lot of favoritism issues, and things like that. So, if it was me, I would do it. I just sharing that experience with your son, I think is really cool. I would be all about doing that, but you've got to be really, really careful with it. And I wouldn't continue to coach them all the way through high school. I think just do it for that 1 year and see how it is. Ruben asks, Coach, are you still holding hitting camps? Man, I haven't done that in a long time. COVID's knocked out the camp situation a little bit, but I'm going to do some stuff. If you go to CoachLyle.com, I'm going to start doing some workshops here in the fall that I think people will really like. DJ says, good morning from Provo, Utah. Good morning. Sarah, Bulldog Country, Central California. That's awesome. We've got 6 minutes left on the shot clock. So Jesse asks, what do you think of a multi-sport athletes in the same season? I see kids do travel ball and AAU basketball in the summer at the same time. I see kids missing practices. It really depends on the age group. 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I'm totally fine with it. And I think the coaches should be totally fine with it. I think that the conversation needs to be had, though, hey, if you miss practice, you might not get as much playing time. And it's not a punishment, but it's a reward for the kids who were there full time. So you've got two 12-year-old kids or 14-year-old kids, and they're on the same team, and one kid misses half the practices. To me, I'm going to reward that kid who's there all the time a little bit more with playing time just because they're there every day. It's not fair. To me, it's really not fair to that kid. So you got to be really careful about that. And that's my opinion. So I think it's totally fine to play two sports at the same time. You just got to know there's going to be some sacrifice there. You might lose out on some playing time there. Overly communicate to the coaches. Make sure you guys are on the same page because there can be a lot of frustration with you missing practices and stuff like that. It can be done, but it's tricky. I would try to avoid it as much as you can. So that's something I would try to do. Pablo says, I just want to get a consensus. During parent-teacher meetings, do your schools include the coaches? So based on the segment, should they be included? Interesting question. Parent-teacher meetings, do your schools include? I've never heard of that. Maybe some of you guys have experienced that. I've never had a coach involved in parent-teacher meetings, but I like the idea of it. I think that's cool. Beverly says, what are your thoughts on kids moving schools to play varsity sports? Does that letter really mean anything? Yeah, I would highly encourage you not to ever transfer schools to First Sports. There are so many avenues nowadays with travel ball and club sports that you don't need that high school sport to go on to the next level. High school should be about the experiences of life. My best memories in high school aren't sports. They are spending time with my friends and living life with them and the lunch and the quad and all the things that we did and movies. So to move schools just to play a sport, man, I can't. I just don't see that being a good decision. I don't see a good balance in your life in that situation. If you're at a school where you're not going to play varsity, I would encourage that kid to go back to the drawing board and get better. Work on your skills so you make varsity. That would be the number one thing. And two, if that doesn't happen for you, focus on travel ball, focus on club ball. Work on making the team next year, but I would not transfer schools ever for that unless, there's always exceptions, but if it's just for the sport, I would not do it. Jeannie says, hi from Huntington Beach. Oh, one of my favorite places in the world. Hoping to go there at some point this summer, that's for sure. Jerry says, last year our son was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, possibly no fall sports. Do you do the operation or wait till the end of the year? To me, it's about kids getting healthy and getting healthy now. And especially if he's young, I would, unless it's a college athlete who's in season, I would get the surgery and get your kids better now. Ryan says, what content, books, videos would you recommend for the mental side of athletics? There's a lot of them. The mental side of hitting, the mental side of pitching. Any book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership would be a great one. I think there's a lot of movies and videos. Make sure you're following Proactive Coaching on Facebook. That would be a good one. Proactivecoaching.info would be a great one for coaches. We got 2 minutes left on the shot clock this morning, so I want to make sure I get to everybody's questions. Randall asks, how do you maintain skills in multi-sport while kids stay in one sport, continue to advance in the one sport? Do the multiple sports kids suffer? They can, and I talked about this a little bit in the segment. If you're a multi-sport athlete, and you got to understand that if you really want to be at the top level in the other sports, you're going to have to put in that extra time, okay? You're going to have to put in way more time than anybody else. And like for me as a kid, I didn't mind doing that. Like I said, I could go out in the backyard and practice for 3 hours. We were lucky back then that screen time addictions wasn't a thing. So for me, you've got to do that. If you're going to give equal effort across the board, you are going to suffer. But if you want to play multiple sports and you want to play at the next level, you're going to have to put in a ton of extra work in whatever sport that you want to. So it can suffer, but that's something we've got to really work on. Mike asked, do you think overuse injuries are from overuse or poor mechanics? I often have to work with my daughter to prevent sidearm throwing. So it's both. They go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes we have overuse injuries because we have overuse. Like literally, we have high school baseball. We have 12-year-old baseball pitchers pitching way too much. They throw 100 pitches on Saturday, 100 pitches on Sunday. There's overuse. Mechanics is part of it too. They go hand in hand. You got having good throwing mechanics or having doing the movement correctly is huge too. So they're both things, and for me, I would do that. Robert from Helena, Montana. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks, Robert, for tuning in. My wife was born in Missoula, Montana. One of the places that I love visiting Montana. Spent some time in Flathead Lake a couple summers ago, so that was pretty awesome. We've got 13 seconds left on the shot clock. We're just finishing up our Q&A. Thanks to all the great questions this morning, and thanks for tuning in. If you're just tuning in, I'm looking up at the scoreboard. We are trying to get to 300 likes this morning, and we are at 280 likes. So close. So hit that like button. Hit that share button if you're just tuning in. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone tuning in this morning. And definitely will come visit Montana soon. Trust me, it's on my bucket list of returning very soon. Just hit 308 likes, 313 likes. Thanks everybody for hitting that like button over and over again. That's awesome. I appreciate it. So here's the thing. I want to leave you guys. I always like to leave our show with a segment. With some advice and some experience from my coaching. Yesterday we talked all about playing time and playing time issues. Okay, so I thought this would be a really good quote to leave. This is from Shane Battier, played in the NBA for a long time, an incredible player. I want to read you this quote from him. He said, "I don't complain about playing time. My job is to play so well the coach can't sit me." What a great quote. I think it resonates with so many people, coaches especially. I tell my athletes all the time, I don't write the starting lineup. You do. And what I mean by that is that your skills, the effort that you put into practice, what you put in, that's what determines your playing time. So practice so hard, practice so well, become so good at it that the coach can't sit you. They have to play you. That's one of the best ways to deal with playing time. I talked about this a lot yesterday, but to me, that's one of the best ways to deal with playing time. Just leave no doubt in the coach's mind that they should be playing with you. If you want to connect with me, guys, again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Coach Lyle. You can follow with me and connect with me at Instagram @Coach Lyle, Facebook @Coach Lyle, And follow me on Twitter at Coach Lyle as well. As soon as the show is over, go to one of those places and can connect with me there. Tomorrow, we've got another great topic. I hope you guys can tune in. I appreciate everybody who tuned in this morning. We're about to hit 400 likes. That's awesome. At the end of the show, if you really like the show, hit the share button. Let other people know about the show, and then maybe they can tune in tomorrow. We got another great topic tomorrow, so... I had a lot of fun today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and shared some coffee with me. But now it's time to say goodbye. But I'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Now go out and win the day.